Emma's heart pounded as the Greyhound bus crossed the state line into Tennessee, the sprawling landscape giving way to the twinkling lights of Nashville. The city's skyline glimmered like a beacon, promising new beginnings and the fulfillment of long-held dreams. She clutched her scuffed guitar case tightly, her fingers tracing the initials carved into the worn leather, her mother's and her own, entwined. The hum of conversations around her faded into a dull buzz as she imagined herself on stage, her voice harmonizing with the soul of the city. But beneath her excitement lurked a whisper of unease, a shadow she couldn't quite place, as if something awaited her arrival just beyond the horizon. Settling into a modest apartment above a dusty record shop, Emma reveled in the cacophony of sounds that defined her new home. Street musicians, honking horns, and the distant echo of laughter. The walls of her room were thin, adorned with peeling wallpaper that hinted at decades of stories. Each night, she ventured into the heart of the city, guitar slung over her shoulder, seeking out open mic nights and dingy bars where dreams were both born and dashed. Her performances were met with polite applause, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that her voice was lost in the static of countless others. One evening, after a particularly disheartening set, she wandered aimlessly until a dimly lit alley caught her eye. At its end stood an ancient shop she hadn't noticed before, its sign reading, "Eldridge Books, Antiques and Oddities" in faded gold lettering. Drawn inside by a force she couldn't name, Emma breathed in the scent of aged paper and leather bindings. The shop was a maze of towering shelves, each crammed with volumes that seemed to whisper secrets. In the far corner, a single book rested on a pedestal, a thick tome bound in dark, weathered hide, symbols etched into its cover that shifted when she tried to focus on them. "That one calls to you, doesn't it?" a raspy voice murmured. She turned to see an elderly man, his eyes milky yet piercing. Without waiting for a response, he added, "It's been waiting for someone like you." Emma hesitated before gently lifting the book, its weight surprising in her hands. Flipping it open, she found pages filled with sheet music unlike any she'd seen. Notes spiraled across the staves in intricate patterns, accompanied by annotations in a language she didn't recognize. That night, sleep eluded her. Lying in bed, she felt the melodies from the book weaving through her mind, haunting and beautiful. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were vivid and unsettling. She stood in a dense forest beneath a sky devoid of stars, a circle of shadowy figures surrounding her. They moved in sync to a rhythm she felt more than heard, their whispers melding with the rustling leaves. At the center of the circle, a fire blazed, its flames flickering in tandem with an otherworldly chant. The melody from the book played in the background, each note pulling her deeper into the dream. She awoke just before dawn, the final echoes of the chant lingering in her ears. The air in her room felt heavy, and a chill clung to her skin despite the warmth of the summer night. Driven by a compulsion she didn't understand, Emma picked up her guitar and began to play the melody from her dream. The notes flowed effortlessly, her fingers moving as if guided by an unseen force. As the final chord resonated, a sudden gust of wind rattled her windows, and the lights flickered before plunging the room into darkness. Outside, dogs howled, and the distant wail of sirens cut through the silence. Shaken, she resolved to incorporate the mysterious song into her next performance, hoping it might set her apart. The following night the bar was unusually crowded, a hushed excitement buzzing among the patrons. As she took the stage, a strange anticipation settled over her. The first notes seemed to hang in the air, and as she sang, the room grew still. Faces blurred, and time seemed to slow. When she finished, a palpable tension snapped, and whispers erupted. Some audience members hurried out, their expressions a mix of awe and fear, while others stared at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. In the days that followed, unsettling events began to ripple through the city. Flocks of birds flew in disoriented patterns, crashing into windows and circling buildings endlessly. Electronics malfunctioned. Radios played static-laden versions of songs that hadn't aired in decades. People reported vivid nightmares of dark forests and chanting figures, waking in cold sweats without knowing why. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was connected to it all. Her own dreams grew more disturbing. The shadowy figures now had faces, their eyes voids that seemed to consume light. The melody haunted her every waking moment, fragments of it escaping her lips unconsciously. Seeking answers, she returned to Eldridge Books, but the alley where it had stood was now a brick wall, overgrown with ivy as if no building had ever existed there. Desperate, Emma delved into researching Nashville's history, spending hours in library archives and speaking to local historians. She discovered mentions of her melody in transcripts dating back to the early 1800s, references to a cursed song associated with unexplained phenomena and tragedies. One name surfaced repeatedly: Eliza Moore, a singer who had caused a sensation before vanishing without a trace. A faded photograph showed a woman who looked strikingly like Emma, her eyes holding the same mix of determination and longing. Rumors claimed Eliza had dabbled in dark arts, her performances linked to a series of unfortunate events that culminated in a devastating fire. The more Emma uncovered, the more she felt the threads of fate tightening around her. Determined to break the cycle, she tried to destroy the book, but every attempt was thwarted. Flames engulfed it without leaving a mark. Water slid off its surface as if repelled. The melody consumed her thoughts, leaving little room for anything else. Friends grew concerned as she became withdrawn, her gaze distant. One evening, as she stood on the pedestrian bridge overlooking the river, she sensed a presence beside her. Turning, she saw one of the shadowy figures from her dreams, its form solid yet translucent. "It's time," it whispered in a voice like rustling leaves. Panic surged, and she stumbled back, nearly losing her footing. Gathering her courage, she demanded to know what it wanted. The figure simply pointed toward the heart of the city before dissipating into the night. Realizing she couldn't escape, Emma decided to face whatever awaited her. As midnight approached, she made her way to an old amphitheater on the outskirts of town, its crumbling stages and overgrown seats a relic of bygone days. The moon hung low, casting an otherworldly glow over the scene. Taking her place at the center of the stage, she began to sing the cursed melody one final time. The notes poured out of her with a power that shook the ground. Shadows emerged from the darkness, surrounding her in a tightening circle. The wind whipped fiercely and the sky churned with ominous clouds. As she reached the climax of the song, the shadow figures surged forward, their forms melding into hers. A searing pain shot through her, but she continued singing, her voice rising above the tempest. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted, and a shockwave rippled outward. When the light faded, the amphitheater was silent and empty. Emma was gone. In the aftermath, the city slowly returned to normal. The strange occurrences ceased, and the collective unease lifted as if a storm had passed. Those who had known Emma searched for her, but no trace was ever found. Stories circulated about the girl who sang a song that almost brought the city to its knees. Some believed she had sacrificed herself to contain the darkness. Others whispered that she had been claimed by it. Years later, musicians would occasionally find tattered pages of sheet music drifting through the city, notes resembling the intricate patterns Emma had once seen. On quiet nights, when the wind swept through the streets just so, A faint melody could be heard echoing from the abandoned amphitheater, a haunting tune that filled listeners with both sorrow and inexplicable hope. Locals spoke of Emma in hushed tones, her story becoming part of Nashville's rich tapestry of legends. And though the city moved on, the memory of a young woman whose voice bridged the realms lingered, a reminder of the thin veil between dreams and nightmares, talent and destiny.